So I wanted to do a review of a newer pinball game. However, once I started looking at the cover art and the title and everything else, it really got me to thinking of an old pinball game. So before I talk about the new one, I'm going to talk about that one. The game is Dragon's Fury, and I want to give a little bit of backstory on this one. I know I told this story in my collection unboxing video, but no one watched all 12 hours of that monstrosity, and I don't expect you to. So let me recap real quick. Back in my college days, a bunch of friends, well, a couple friends and I used to have a weekly ritual where we would go to the local game store, we'd each throw in a few bucks, and I would buy just random games to add to my collection that we would buy solely based on the title or the box art or just whatever arbitrary thing sounded good at the moment. And one of the games I accidentally came across in that process was this, Dragon's Fury. It's a game made by Compile, the people who at the time did Lode Runner and would go on to do the Hyperdimension Neptunia series. And it was published by Tengen for the TurboGrafx and Genesis back in 1990. And while it was originally called Devil's Crush in Japan, when it came to America, it was renamed to Dragon's Fury. And because we're allergic to religion in video games, because God forbid someone think about religion, I guess, a lot of things in the game were changed, like coffins with crosses on them were changed to vases, and pentagrams were changed to just star icons. But that's enough backstory. Let's actually talk about the game itself. So to start, like I mentioned before, it is a pinball game. So some of the gameplay basics are kind of understood. However, this is so much more than just a pinball game. First of all, a lot of the arts and just the overall aesthetic of the game is actually inspired by and based on stuff like H.R. Geiger. You could specifically see those influences in some of the scenes, which I'm sure I have on the screen right now. If I don't, I'm doing a terrible job as an editor. But also to make it more fun, there's the main pinball table, which has 3 different tiers, each with its own set of flippers to keep you from instantly, descending back down to the bottom section. And each one of those has little hidden mini areas that usually you have to do something to activate the entrance first, and then you of course have to hit the ball into the entrance. And then when you go in there, you have like a mini game type thing where you have to, say, beat a small boss or destroy all of the enemies on the screen or what have you. Really, a lot of those mini games feel a lot more like a different alternative pinball game from the Genesis era, and that's Sonic Spinball. So it's really interesting and fun, but overall, it is still a pinball game. There's not a whole lot to say. I just wanted to mention this game because this is what I'm going to be comparing the new game to. And with that, let's go to the new game. So this is Demon's Tilt, and unlike Dragon's Fury, this was actually not made or published by any large names. This was created by a single guy, Adam Ferrando, and published by Flarb LLC, who you may know for such hits as Nothing That You Know At All. But like Dragon's Fury, this game pulls in a lot of its inspiration from the deepest, darkest corners of Hot Topic, with occult icons like H.P. Lovecraft. And actually, really funny story that I discovered while writing the second half of this script. The creator of this, Adam, and one of the guys from Flarb, or possibly the guy from Flarb, because I can't imagine it's a very big company with a name like Flarb. They were at one point talking and reminiscing about their love of early pinball games, and specifically the Crush trilogy. So me comparing this to Dragon's Fury is actually incredibly apt because that was their main inspiration for creating this. But now I'll talk about the actual game itself. When I first get into it, I will say the overall look feels a lot like Dragon's Fury. However, it kind of falls off from there. One of the first things that really struck out to me is that the responsiveness of the paddles, they don't feel as tight. In Dragon's Fury, every time you hit the button to hit the paddle, it felt like it really connected with the ball. It felt like you had a lot of control. Like it was as responsive as the real paddles on an actual, well-maintenanced pinball machine. Whereas these ones felt a little jerky, a little unresponsive, and there was one or two times where I'm pretty sure my ball actually just clipped right through the paddle, causing me to just fall through and either go to the lower tier or right off the table. So I didn't love the controls. They weren't quite as tight as I would have liked. Also, while the table looks very good, obviously it's a newer console, so they can do a lot more visually. The sprites look a little better and a little cleaner. Overall, there's just not as much going on. It still has 3 tiers, like the one in the Genesis. However, here, they're not very distinct, I guess. I mean, they are, but they don't feel as special. There's no sub-levels or mini-games or anything like that, at least not that I've found. Maybe there is something, I just wasn't good enough to discover right away. But it felt a lot more bland and a lot more repetitive than Dragon's Fury did. That game, it felt like there were more things that you were building toward as far as trying to get into all 6 of the mini-games and then complete all of them. Whereas here, you're just going for the high score on the table. And yes, I know that is the point of pinball, so I can't really fault them for that. But like I said, I'm not just comparing this to pinball games overall. I'm comparing it to a very specific one that they had in mind while building this, it turns out. And I just find this to be inferior. And I know at the end of the day that they were inspired by that game and not necessarily trying to recreate that game, which I understand. So I can't 100% fault them for not having the same minigames and the same everything that those games had. But at the same time, if I built a PC game that I said was inspired by Castle of the Winds, and then it didn't have any roguelike procedurally generated levels, and it didn't have any MS Paint drawn graphics, then is it really inspired by Castle of the Winds? So overall, it's an okay game. You know, as far as pinball games go, you kind of know what to expect when going into it, and this is more of that. So if you just want a pinball game to play, great, here you go. As far as I know, it is only the one table. There are different game modes that are also harder game modes, so I didn't actually try those because I am a filthy casual. So there might be different tables in those, so I don't want to speak too out of turn. Maybe there's more tables in the harder difficulties, but on the standard, there's only the one. And it's just, I don't know, it's very basic. It's kind of underwhelming, and given the choice between the two, I would definitely go with Dragon's Fury. And unfortunately, price-wise, they're both about the same price right now. This is a brand new PS4 game, and that is a loose Genesis cartridge. So good luck if that is the way you want to go, but if you want the better experience, Dragon's Fury is definitely the one you should pick up. And that's all I have, at least word-wise. I still have whatever the hell cancer plague thing is going on in my throat. But that's it for the review. So I'm going to go away and edit out all the many, many coughs in between the lines that were in the filming of this, and I'll see you later.